Good afternoon, everybody. This is About the Labor, the new look About the Labor. I'm your host, Joe Johnson, owner of Purple PTSD Vikings Territory, Purple Territory Radio, co-host of Morning Joe's. Overall negative Vikings fan, apparently, is my new brand I discovered. Here with two of my bestest pals, two guys that I'm super excited to introduce everybody to. Everybody that didn't see our live draft stream Thursday night. That's first Kirby O'Connor, who is the editor of our little network. How you doing, man?
Good. Better than you, apparently.
I guess. It's all dark down here too. It's actually brighter than usual. It's burning in my rods and cones.
You
And
took off the you
I'll
took off the barbershop background.
Yeah, I wanted people to see my background before I put it in a heap in my driveway and burned it. Um, I'm only partially kidding. Let the people know a little bit about yourself, Kirby. I'm sure people are aware of who I am or relatively sick of it, so I don't need to get into my story.
Um, yeah, I'm editor of the network, like Joe said, kind of the draft guru. So I did all of the draft profiles leading into the draft. So if you read any of those, thanks for that. Um,
Mom.
Mostly my mom. She was just refreshing the page a bunch. Um, But yeah, I do that. I have been on About the Labor before. I was part of version like 2.0,
251 or
2.5.
252.
Yeah, it was something like that, and I just didn't have time to do it anymore. Along with schedules just stopped lining up, so then Joe took over, and now we're back again, relaunching. It's always successful. You know a product's successful when you have to launch it like 6 or 7 times.
I know.
Um,
Our poor followers. It's like, really, guys? Really?
But yeah, that's what I do. Mostly draft stuff. I'll probably be somewhat disappearing in the next few months. Not completely, but I'll be slowing down on daily content to work on a new project involving the draft that Joe and I will announce soon enough.
Woo-wee! Yeah, it's coming. To round out our how did Mike Tice put it?
Motley Crue.
Motley Crew, which is probably the nicest way to put it, is another of our draft experts. So I'm kind of feeling like I'm gonna just get killed here for the three-part article I wrote over the course of 20 hours yesterday. DeShawn Vaughn, who is a senior writer for VikingsTerritory.com and PurplePTSD.com, comes to us out of Maryland. I finally remembered it, which means that we're kind of a continental group. We got Kirby in Oregon, me in the psych ward in St. Paul, and DeShawn in Maryland. Introduce yourself and let the people know who you are.
Yeah, so I've been with you guys almost a year now. Actually, I think it's been over a
Wow.
year. Um, so yeah, I've done some draft stuff. If you actually on my Twitter page at Vikings fans 16, I have threads up about our fourth round picks and our second round pick. Those are out now. If you guys want to go take a look at that, just a couple points that I were making about strength and weaknesses, and it's actually been this is my second year around doing draft stuff, and I really got kind of deep into it this year. Made my first big board, even though I didn't hit 100 draft scouts, and I was pretty active this year, and I'm looking to be more active once I get out of college in the next upcoming weeks, and give us something to read while we endure these next 4 months.
Cool, cool. And for people that don't know, I started this network in 2015, and it's all been downhill from there. Speaking of which, I wanted to get into a little bit of news before we get into some of the grading of the draft picks and our thoughts on the draft as a whole. It came out a couple hours ago via Daily Norseman that the Vikings the day of the draft, I think it was Thursday, it might have been Friday before the second, third round. There was a report from Courtney Cronin where Spielman essentially said, with the amount of draft capital that the Vikings did have, that they might be looking to be more aggressive, to move up, so on and so forth. We didn't see that. We saw, what we usually see, which is the Vikings trading down a lot, and not to cast aspersions on that. That's fine. And that came because there was some sort of like live stream where in the background the GM of the Bucks was caught on audio, essentially saying that Spielman had called him and was looking to trade up, but that they weren't looking to drop down that far. So that would have been the 14th overall pick. People are speculating whether or not that would have been a Tristan Wirfs out of Iowa, or I think all the receivers except for Ruggs were on the board at that point, so we could have, ended up with Judy. Or what do you guys think? I'll start with you, DeShawn. What do you think they were looking to do, so on and so forth?
I think it probably would have been a gross irresponsibility to move up that far and not take Tristan Wirfs. So I know I saw a couple things saying Kubiak really liked Justin Jefferson, but I think at 14, Judy was still on the board, Lamb was still on the board, Wirtz was still on the board. If we did do it and still took a wide receiver, that would not have been a great move. But I think if they were looking to move up that far, they were probably eyeing Tristan Wirfs. So that's my take on it. I don't see them moving up that many spots and not taking their biggest position of need.
Yeah, what do you think, Kirby?
Yeah, I'm pretty much on the same level as DeShawn. I did read, I can't remember where it was. It probably was just some random tweet. After they picked up Jefferson, that they were incredibly happy that he was available where he was on the board, and that they tried to move up to get him. So I don't think they were trying to move up to 14 to get him, but it's entirely possible with how confusing this front office is sometimes.
Wait, you're talking about Jefferson?
Yeah, that's what they were looking to move up. I think it was probably they were trying to leapfrog the Eagles. Was probably what that report was about. But if it was them moving up to 14 to get Jefferson, I probably would have not owned a computer anymore, because I would have thrown it out my window.
Yeah, I mean, I can link to this in the article about this episode, but I think all three of us didn't like that pick at 22, maybe for a myriad of reasons, but I don't want to foreshadow my thoughts on the draft overall, but I just think there's a weird cognitive dissonance I'm seeing from people who didn't like or hated the Vikings cutting Josh Klein, who didn't necessarily like the picking of Jefferson at 22, and who I guess were happy with the corners, but just the sheer amount of corners taken, but still being very excited about the draft as a whole, or saying it was this massive success. I don't get it. I mean, we can get into, I guess, our thoughts on Jefferson now. We have some sort of thoughts or news about how COVID might impact the NFL season that we could talk about later. I was going to do that earlier, but I think our live reaction was genuine, and it said it all about that pick. My thoughts on it are, I don't know, this draft to me just felt like a microcosm of the entire Zimmer and Spielman era. If there was a draft that encompassed what they've done, what they always do, it was this draft. Just it was on a much larger scale because they ended up with 15 total picks. I mean, reaching for a second tier receiver in the early 20s or in the 20s in general, who happens to be from the SEC. That's Justin Jefferson, Laquan Treadwell, Cordarrelle Patterson. Trading down, taking another corner in the first or second round. That makes what, 4 in between Gladney, Hughes, Waynes, Mackenzie Alexander, don't think I'm missing anybody. Xavier Rhodes was a first round pick, but that predates Zimmer's time here. Um, you know, taking in a tackle when arguably the biggest position of need on this entire team is the interior of the line, and then just getting tons of defensive backs, defensive players, and then giving a sixth and seventh round developmental offensive lineman that won't end up even making the team, maybe the practice squad for a year. We've seen this before, so I just am a little. For me, what I was hoping, or I guess I'll put it this way: my fear was that they were going to do something different and realize maybe that they should invest in building the offensive line first, and then go for other positions in need, because they've shown that they can develop late round, mid round defensive players a lot better than they can offensive players or offensive linemen. And so that's kind of where I started to get a little verklempt with the pick with Jefferson, because it was like, oh my God, they're just doing exactly what they always do. And so I guess, I think that pick was bad. I think that, I wrote an article about his fit on this Vikings offense, his 98.6% of catches coming out of the slot, what Thielen does out of the slot, how Thielen has done things in 2 seasons in a row that Wes Welker only did in one in his career. And so I felt like it was a reach that actually hurt the passing offense more than anything else, and that's kind of where my disappointment lied. What did you think, Mr. O'Connor?
Well, I think I disagree slightly. Definitely at the time, I was very upset about the Jefferson pick. I still question the fit like you do. Hopefully, it's a completely different animal this year, but hopefully they can work with both Jefferson and Thielen to figure out, game plans to get them both running their best routes out of the slot. Maybe running 4 wide receiver sets, which it would be crazy because that'd be almost every wide receiver that's going to be on the depth chart, and running 2 of them out of the opposite slots.
With Osborne too, who's a slot guy, apparently.
Right. And so I'm a little wary about the fit there, but I think they'll be able to work that out. I'm on board with the fact that after. I'm fine with the first probably 5 picks of this draft, although I'm a little confused about taking a defensive end in the 4th, although apparently he's very Danielle Hunter-like and could be that sort of player if they develop him right. After that, I'm just confused by like you said, the volume of defensive players taken. Like D tackle, linebacker, cornerback, wide receiver, offensive tackle, safety, D end, quarterback, who's probably the worst quarterback in the draft, and you could have gotten as an undrafted free agent, Nate Stanley. I'm sorry, I really hate that pick. Another safety, and finally a person who has actually played guard in college. So I'm confused. I'm confused, and I don't really like the second half of the draft. I feel a lot better than I did on our live stream, if you saw it. I feel a lot better than I did about the first 3 or 4 picks, just because I knew cornerback was a big need, and I figured one of the first picks would be that. So I kind of accepted that. I would have wanted Fulton over Gladney, but I think Gladney, he's at least going to give 100% effort all the time, and he seems to be lanky, and he's very possibly going to be one of the top corners in this draft. So I don't feel bad about that pick, and I feel a lot better after being able to get Ezra Cleveland in the 2nd round, just because watching his tape, he is a very good fit as a tackle, and I genuinely think that he gives them flexibility to either say, and I don't like the idea of moving Riley Reef inside, but the idea of either saying to Riley Reef, hey, take a pay cut or move position, or we're going to, send you on your way, because they save, I think we determined it was something like $10 million by letting Reef go. So
yeah, before June?
Or yeah, after June 1st.
Yeah, post June 1st cut.
And I like the pick of Cam Dantzler. I think he's the closest thing to a man-to-man shutdown corner that there was in this draft, because that's not a common thing anymore. So I'm not in the camp of this was an amazing draft. The Vikings should be given the top grade in the NFL for this draft, A+ across the board. I'm of the mind that they made some very good picks that may turn out to be great picks. But they also made a lot of really confusing picks, and like Joe said, picks that are going to end up being just cut straight out of camp or on the practice squad. So I don't know. I'm excited to see what they can do with these guys, but it doesn't feel like they've gotten any better necessarily in the immediate future, which we can come back to that. Just my idea of what they think they're doing for a strategy here, as far as building the team. But I'll throw it over to DeShawn.
It almost feels like Kubiak wanted slot guys for some reason. You know what I mean? Like to take both of those guys. I know that Osborne at Miami wasn't solely a slot guy, but at Buffalo he was. A lot of the draft profiles I read about him said that that's probably what he's going to end up being in the pros. But it just seems strange to me for a team that lost Diggs, and thus the biggest thing they were missing by not having Diggs was a guy who could stretch the field, a true outside receiver who can maybe line up in the slot but runs immaculate routes, great top end speed, so on and so forth. And so then you look at people saying, well, yeah, Thielen is good down the field too because he's got this catch radius that's amazing. I wanted to, before getting to DeShawn's thoughts on this, just read this quote about Thielen. In 2017 and 2018 combined, Thielen took 52% of his snaps from the slot, a marked difference from his early years. His seamless progression is almost unfathomable. He racked up more than 700 yards and 7 touchdowns in 2018 from the inside. His first season taking more than 50% of his snaps from the slot, a feat Wes Welker accomplished just once in his 12-year career. On passes targeted 20 or more yards downfield to wideouts lined up in the slot position, Thielen was 1 of 4 to haul in 3 touchdowns while accumulating 150 yards or more, blah, blah, blah. So it just seems like to me, again, that they are going to have these really one-dimensional guys in Justin Jefferson or Osborne that are not only not going to help down the field, but hurt the Vikings' ability to maybe strike down the field because Thielen's been lined up in the slot more than 50% of the time. And so, again, it's a head scratcher. Maybe they know something we don't about, I don't know, Tajay Sharp. I mean, isn't that what Chad Beebe could have done anyway? I mean, I don't know. DeShawn, what do you think about that pick or the draft as a whole?
So I think I just might be a tad bit more positive about the draft than you guys. Even though on Twitter I was kind of like ostracized for saying that the Justin Jefferson pick wasn't an A+ draft. But yeah, like you said, I saw the same kind of stats for Adam Thielen, where 7 of his 9 touchdowns in 2018 came from the slot, and like over like 60% of his yards or something. And I'm on record saying that Adam Thielen is one of the best, if not the best, slot guy in the NFL. I think the only guy up there contending with him is like Tyreek Hill, which is insane if you give the speed difference. So,
totally,
he's a master of the slot, and he's going to have to give up some of that time to Justin Jefferson because that's Jefferson's natural spot, unfortunately. So there's really they're going to have to find a way. And it's a good thing that Adam is ultra productive in the slot because he only needs half his time there. Had it been like where Jefferson, I think if Adam Thielen was like Jefferson and he spent like 90% of his time in the slot to get there, we can have an issue. But I think because Thielen is already there at 50% and he's already being ultra productive from that percentage, I don't think there's going to be that big of an issue, even though I do believe Jefferson is going to have to learn to play outside. I think if he does not learn to play outside, he's not going to be able to fit on this team. So that's one hump he's going to have to get over. But for the rest of the drafts, my thought process, what I came up with was that if you just take the Vikings draft for what it is, forget what they need for a second, and just take it for what it is, it's an A+ draft. They got some guys. Ezra Cleveland at 58 is insane. He probably should have went 33, 34, 35. Troy Dye, James Lynch, where they got those guys at, probably shouldn't have been able to get them from where they got them at. But once you start factoring what it actually takes to get the Vikings from a good team to a Super Bowl contending team, is where you start to say, well, why would you draft Troy Dye when maybe Natane Mutai was on the board? When we know he has an injury history, but when he is good, he was rated PFS like number 2 or number 1 inside guy in the entire draft.
Yeah.
Or why would you take Osborne when you need a guy like Darnell Mooney who's super fast, or Jeff Thomas who went undrafted, and you need a guy that can stretch the field? These are like 4-3, 4-4 guys. So that's why I gave them a B plus. I was on Twitter. I said the Vikings, and I really like this draft. Don't get me wrong. Like I've been going out of my way to do profiles on these guys and film threads. I really like this draft, but like I said, they did not fill the position that forced them to lose to the Philadelphia Eagles in 2017, lose to the Bears in 2018, lose to the San Francisco 49ers in 2019. They have not filled that position correctly yet, and because of that, I just can't give them an A plus or an A for this draft.
And I think you point out a really interesting aspect of evaluating this draft. And there's a lot of people that I highly respect who I won't like drag by mentioning who they are really, because that's not the point of it. But a lot of people that either are just fans or in Vikings media were kind of essentially telling me I was crazy for being unhappy with this draft. And I think that after going back and forth for 3 days with a lot of people and looking at these articles that I wrote and what the responses to them are, it might almost be like we're talking about two different things at times. Like I think that, like you said, if you look at this draft objectively and say, wow, they amassed 15 total picks, something they haven't done since what, 1985. In a vacuum, are these players good picks? Without, like you said, looking at positions in need or the history of this team in the last few seasons or under Zimmer as a whole. I had somebody who hosts his own podcast tell me you can't evaluate a draft based on players you didn't take. You can only analyze the players that you did take, which I think is, again, a vacuum argument. That's not how football works or how these drafts work. I've had a lot of people saying, all this is hindsight. These are hindsight arguments. Forget the fact that I've been arguing about this for 4 years in articles and on shows. I mean, Joe Oberly, who I do morning shows with, said this. I was in the Vikings territory comment section, said I was a hindsight guy, and I'm like, that I've been talking about this before each draft and after each draft. I've had the same complaint for the most part each time. Every season ends up going down the same way because the line play is just so atrocious. And so I think that, yes, it is amazing they had 15 picks. And yes, maybe let's say year one, Gladney and company are all, I was going to say Pro Bowlers, but maybe that won't exist. And the defense is good, and Justin Jefferson is the rookie of the year on the offense. That still doesn't really improve the team from where they were last season, right? Like, let's say Jefferson turns into Diggs and those other guys contribute as much. I don't want to say as Xavier Rhodes because that's kind of not helping my argument, but you get what I'm saying. So let's just say the team, those guys all pan out to be as good as the team was last year, which is saying a lot because they're all obviously rookies. The case in point is the same thing, that the interior of the line is bad. We saw how disruptive that is. I mean, there were points last year where we were just pissed at Stefanski because he didn't roll Cousins out of the pocket 90% of the time. You can't win that way, and it's a little frustrating that they just don't seem to learn from that. And with the draft with 15 picks, the ones in the middle rounds that you talked about, there were guys available that could have been plug and play guys, and that's not hindsight, that's foresight. And it just seems like they could have set themselves up having Bradbury, O'Neal, and building this really young line that could have carried them the next 10 seasons. Instead, we're talking about doing what we always do, which is moving tackles to guard, even though they either haven't ever played guard or they haven't played it since their freshman year in college. Some people are saying even Cleveland has guard flexibility, even though he was a tackle the entire time in college. Like, I'm sick of shuffling guys around and just hoping it'll work because it never has. And so that's really what my frustration with this draft is. It's just more of the same and expecting different results. But some people are just talking about players taken, the amount of players taken. Wow, look at that. What a haul. 27 guys with undrafted free agents. That is good. I mean, they for a team that's rebuilding, wow.
I
But they
think
didn't
you,
really fix
not to interrupt
what
you, Joe. I think you
is
hit on.
persistently broken.
I think you hit on maybe unintentionally a really important point that it bothers me so much as a draft guy. It bothers me so much to be part of that community almost, for the reason of almost everybody from the networks, like the big networks, ESPN, NFL Network, whatever, all the way down to like essentially us, with very few exceptions. Everybody gets so excited about playmakers and just big time guys like I can't believe that Tua had the hype that he did after being injured 2 years in a row, and that's one that like maybe I'll be wrong on. I was kind of wrong on Kyler Murray last year. I wasn't sold on him. Then he went out and did very well, and I'm glad to eat my words on that one because honestly, I hope I really want guys to succeed. But I just find that everybody gets so sold on playmakers. Everybody gets so sold on skill position guys that it's not the sexy pick ever. Like when the Colts, what was it, 2 years ago, had like 3 picks in the first round and they used 2 on offensive linemen. It wasn't sexy at all, but they then became one of the best lines in football. And like their offense became way better because they had an all-pro guard and then I think a starting tackle that was actually at the caliber of top tier NFL player. So I think that's part of the problem is like people look at these guys and they say, yeah, look at how great the playmakers that they got were. But then you have to consider, okay, but they didn't improve as a team because they didn't get any better. Like they're not going to get any better at protecting Kirk Cousins. I think they did because I think Cleveland's going to be better than Riley Reef or give them flexibility to.
Sure.
Hopefully this is the move. This is under consideration, at least from Spielman, the ability to cut Riley Reef or restructure him as a guard if they're going to move him into guard. I hope they don't. Honestly, I hope they outright cut him and they can sign a better free agent guard. But Lord knows Spielman doesn't make the best decisions on the offensive line. But I think everybody looks at this list and they see cornerbacks and defensive ends and linebackers and wide receivers who scored a ton of touchdowns, and they get really excited about that. And they took one top tier offensive lineman, and they're going to say, well, but they got an offensive lineman. But they got an offensive lineman, like you said, at a position that isn't necessarily the position that was an issue. Like, yes, Riley Reef is not great, and I'm excited about Ezra Cleveland. But to wait until the 6th round to get a guy who's going to be your guard, and that guy was a tackle in college, and to read his scouting reports of lacks power, lacks good technique, leans too much, he's not going to be a day one player. And you're putting a lot of faith in Fat Elfline again and Dakota Dozier and Drew Samia to be very good unless they do make a move for a free agent or make a trade for somebody who's available. It's just I think it's people get so caught up in the skill positions that they forget that guard matters. And I would honestly be, like I said before, I would be fine with the first 3.5 rounds if they had gone guard literally before the 6th and 7th round.
So real quick, just to back what Kirby says, I just looked it up. In 2017, the Colts went 4-12, gave up 239 pressures and 39 sacks. In 2018, when they drafted Quentin Nelson, and I am blanking on the other guy's name, they gave up 20 less sacks in 1 year with 2 rookies and went from 4-12 to 11-5, which is kind of insane.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the third part of my article is titled "If Not X, Then Who." I get a lot of people that say that. If not, I focused on the Treadwell draft because a lot of people say, well, that draft sucked. Then I talk about the Mike Hughes draft, and I think it was widely reported at the time, at least if I remember correctly, that people thought that the Vikings thought that they could take Hughes, and then because of the depth of interior linemen in that draft, that before for their second pick where they took Brian O'Neill, they could end up taking one of the 4 guys that I listed in that article, Will Hernandez, I think, being the best of that bunch. All 4 of which, though, I mean, I think 3 of the 4 have started all 32 games for the teams that drafted them. But I do want to point out something about Josh Klein. Because he missed 3 games in 2019. So here's a list of, and this is very surface level analysis, so I get that it's not this simple, but sometimes it is. The average yards per carry for Devon Cook across the following games: Falcons 5.3, Packers 7.7, Raiders 6.9, Bears 2.5. That was the first game Klein missed. Giants 6.3, Eagles 2.6. Second game Klein missed. Lions 5.7, Skins 4.3, Chiefs 3.4, Cowboys 3.7, Broncos 2.4. Guess which was the other game that Klein missed? Yeah. I mean, the line was bad. It was 27th against in terms of pass protection. But the one positive was the right side of the line with Klein and O'Neill at times opened huge holes for Devon Cook. And for a team that claims to be run first, I get that's Cleveland's strength too, but he seems like a guy who could be the mainstay for a decade plus, but he still has to, as far as I've read anyway, there's some development there. He needs to put on some mass. He's better at second level run blocking than he is pass blocking. I think a lot of people are saying, well, Brian O'Neill started the first year, therefore he can do it. I don't know. I just think that's wishful thinking. I think he might take a while. That's great if Riley Reef is there.
It certainly is, considering the fact that Brian O'Neill wasn't supposed to start before his 3rd year.
Right.
Exactly.
Also, I wanted to hit on something Joe said, just to because I think he hit on something mistakenly. Also, I think the reason, so actually Devon Cook has his most yards running behind Pat Elflein and Riley Reef, unfortunately, and I think that's the only reason Pat Elflein is still starting, because he's actually like a somewhat decent run blocker. He's just terrible in pass protection. But what Joe did hit on is the fact that this offensive line last year made an absolute killing on beating up on bad teams. The Raiders, the Giants, the Chiefs, the Cowboys, they don't have any pass rush against anybody. So, of course, we're going to go in there. Kirk's going to have a million years in the pocket, and it's going to look like we actually did something to the offensive line. And we had 7 or 8 games just like that. So when we see these stats, then I see this one floats around Twitter. It makes its round around Twitter every couple of months, that Kirk Cousins was 3rd or 4th in the NFL in time in the pocket. Well, you got to take into account that we played the Giants, who couldn't pass rush. We played the Raiders, who couldn't pass rush. We played the Redskins, who could barely pass rush, well, at least when we played them. So,
not to mention the Eagles game, they had a completely depleted secondary, and Cousins hit most of his balls on deep play action passes. Just to throw that one out there.
Right, and on the scheme is designed to give you time in the pocket. But here's the stat that I pull up so many times, and no one ever has to answer for me. The Vikings lost, I want to say, 7 games in 2019. 5 of those 7 games featured a pressure rating. I want to say approximately, because I don't know officially how to calculate that stat, but I want to say approximately about 48% of the time Kirk Cousins was being pressured in 5 of 7 of our losses. That is absolutely insane. To be pressured on almost half your dropbacks is
Yeah.
crazy. It's insane. Like you can't operate a football team that way. And another interesting stat that I think kind of pertains to Justin Jefferson, despite Stephon Diggs going for 1,000 yards, in our losses, he only amassed 60 yards receiving twice. And we know how good Stephon Diggs is. I don't think there's a corner in the NFL that can really guard Stephon Diggs. Cousins had trouble getting him the ball when he was under pressure. And we remember, I want to say it was in week 4 against the Bears, when people were ready to take Cousins' head off because he couldn't get the
on
ball
the team
to get Stephon Diggs the ball because he was under pressure. And I keep asking people, how is that going to be different for Justin Jefferson? How, like, out of nowhere is Cousins just going to be able to get Jefferson the ball without any like protection? So I think
unless you switch the whole offense to Sam Bradford, get the ball out in half a second, complete 82% of
5
your
yards
passes
behind the line of scrimmage. There was something that you brought up during the live stream, DeShawn, that I thought was apropos regarding Jefferson as well. Slot corners in general, but spread offenses, especially in college, essentially running free off the line versus press coverage in the NFL. If you could explain that to people and how that kind of applies and what your thoughts were on that for his development in the NFL.
So yeah, I did a little bit of a study on Justin Jefferson, and he has a lot of free releases. So a free release is basically when the defensive back stands like 3 or 4 yards off of you and you just get to run into your route. And it's extremely tough to defend a wide receiver that way. Now just imagine like these college guys trying to do it. Like it's already hard enough now having these guys that aren't as skillful trying to guard Justin Jefferson, who's already an NFL level wide receiver. He's never really had to face press coverage. And what press coverage does, it completely knocks off the timing with the quarterback. So if the quarterback looks your way, you're not where you're supposed to be, you're kind of already out of the play, unless you're dealing with like a DeShawn Watson or Russell Wilson, which we don't have. So if the timing is not right, Jefferson is not going to get the ball. So what Justin Jefferson has to do is while he is outside, even inside, you have corners in the NFL that can migrate to inside. There are guys that are that good that can press you from the slot. So he has to figure out a way to be able to defeat press coverage. This is going to be new to him. I saw a tweet saying that last year was his first year in the slot, which I don't entirely believe. I want to say 2018 was probably mixed a little bit. And even with that, his production in 2018 doesn't even begin to compare to his production in 2019.
Yeah, you're right. He did both in 2018.
Right. So he has to figure out a way. And it's going to be new techniques. It's going to be new everything. And with this diminished offseason program that we're probably going to be looking at, I can see Jefferson struggling in his first year, even though scheme-wise, the scheme is going to be made to help him. The play action, the defense is going to be confused. He's going to have some free releases, and he's also pretty fast too. I think I want to say he ran like a 4.40 or something like that. So he's fast.
I think it was like a 4.48 if I'm not wrong. I'll check.
Like 4.43.
So he has pretty good 4.43. So that's fast. Okay. So that's like dig speed. So he's going to back some guys off with his quickness, which into what sometimes he might be able to get free releases against corners who aren't as good. But I can see him struggling in games against guys like Richard Sherman, who has great press coverage, or I know Darius Slay is not in the division anymore. Kyle Fuller is solid. He's not great. Desmond Trufant is okay in press coverage. Jair Alexander has solid press coverage. I know we played at NFC South this year, so Marshawn Lattimore, if we play the Saints, I'm not entirely sure.
We do.
We do.
Right, might have solid press coverage. So he's going to face some guys with pretty good press coverage, or at least good technique, to where he's going to have to really learn how to adjust. And one thing about it, if you can't get off press, it could bust your career. It really can. Not being able to get off press will get you benched. So it's going to be a big transition for him.
I'm just going to cut this off at the pass because I know we're going to get a lot of crap for you saying that, but I don't think you are saying that he can't do it, or
No, I'm
that
actually. I think he,
everybody doesn't have to make that transition to the NFL. I think you're just saying that with this offseason being shortened, with Jefferson's transition, he's not necessarily going to come in and make a huge impact year one. Is that what you're mostly saying?
Yeah, actually, I want to go on the record to say that I think Justin Jefferson is fully capable of learning how to get off of press coverage, and that I think he will be successful. And I'm not sure he'll be Diggs level, but I'm fairly certain to, at the very least, Justin Jefferson will be a competent wide receiver too, at the very least. So I think he does make that transition. I'm not exactly sure how good he's going to be, but I think against lesser cornerbacks, he'll be able to beat press coverage at the very least. I'm not sure about the Richard Shermans of the world and the Stephon Gilmores and stuff, but against lesser guys, I think he'll be fine. But you have to get that, you have to have a Devontae Adams like release to, or a Stephon Diggs like release to survive in this game.
What did you think of Osborne?
So going through my grades, I want to say I gave the Osborne pick a F. I didn't really understand the pick. We have a crowded room. A third slot guy kind of confused me a little bit. And plus we have Courtney Davis too, who I hear is also a slot guy. I might be off on that one. I'm not entirely sure, but it's Courtney Davis, right? The UDFA we picked up, I believe.
Yeah, Davis is
Yeah.
his last name. His first name is Qantry. So
Oh yeah.
So I hear he's a slot guy too, so that makes 4. But he's a kick returner, and I didn't understand that pick when you could have went a million ways with that pick. That one was kind of weird for me, and I think I'm on the same page as Kirby, as I think rounds like the back half of 4 going through 7 were kind of weird, and that I didn't like them very much.
Yeah. I mean, Davis is also 6'1", so he's got some size. Osborne is what, 5'10", 5'11".
Yeah.
But we can I don't know. It almost seems by design, really, like I said earlier, if they're going with all these guys who are mainly slot guys, I don't know, maybe they're going super neo West Coast.
It could be so.
Jumping the ball off.
So if you guys think back to the Raiders game and to the Falcons game, you think about some of the touchdowns that Cousins thrown. A lot of the touchdowns that they throw are on crossing routes where Cousins takes the ball, he rolls out. We have one guy kind of cross over top to drag the safety, and then you have the underneath guy come across where there's nobody at. And I guess you can say slot guys are maybe better at running that route or whatever, but I know we run that a lot and we had success running it. So that might be the direction they're going to. I'd also like to see them do a lot more RPO stuff. So then they might go that direction too. But I mean, they do have an ex receiver in Tajay Sharp who doesn't really have a track record of being this great wide receiver. But we'll see what direction they decide to go with the offense. Yeah,
I'm a little bullish on Tajay Sharp. I don't know. I think he has a lot of the tools they're looking for. He doesn't have field stretching ability, but I think his short and intermediary route running and hands and all that are good. But again, I think that the biggest need from the position was the ability to stretch the field. I would have been happier with KJ Hamler than Osborne. I know he's like Tavon Austin size, but he actually lined up on the outside more than guys like Jefferson did, and he's like a 4.2 guy, just super fast. Let's get into, I guess, the Gladney pick. I say that I'm kidding. I mean, I guess in a vacuum, again, I like a lot of these picks more than I do when you kind of look at what this team is doing. And yes, they had a tremendous need at corner. My argument just is that Zimmer clearly has been able to find later round guys, even though he spends all these first round picks on these guys. Holton Hill being a good example, that they can develop. And so with Gladney, I would love to hear what you guys think. And then also I've heard a lot of people kind of arguing on Vikings Twitter about how the depth chart looks, who the nickel guy's going to be. I've heard a lot of people saying Hughes will now move to the nickel, and then a lot of people saying what? So, Kirby, yeah, like if you had any Gladney, I was gonna say, trying to
Yeah.
make a joke.
Yeah.
Just couldn't,
Are you
couldn't turn the
Glad?
corner
There
on
you
it.
go.
There you go.
Yeah.
I'm happy with I'm happy with the pick in the sense that they needed a corner, and Gladney probably is going to be one of the best ones off the board. He very much fits the Mike Zimmer mold of like he's got very quick feet, he's long, he plays the ball extremely well at the point of catch. He's kind of shorter, little less. I don't know. He's not really gonna press up on guys and destroy them out of press coverage. Which, having talked with Joe enough on game days, he knows my feeling about the fact that Zimmer likes to set his cornerback 7 yards off the line no matter what.
Young ones especially.
Yeah. So I'm happy enough with the pick, especially if he can play very similar to Trey Waynes over the last few years. I'm happy enough with the pick. I think at the time I said I would have gone with Fulton instead, because Fulton's a much better like physical. I think he plays the receiver a lot better in press coverage. He's a more physical talent, but I don't dislike it. As far as the depth chart goes, I would be extremely confused if Mike Hughes moves inside. Not that he can't do it. Hughes to me is definitely an outside, but I think they are in a little bit of a jam in the sense that Holton Hill is also, I've seen his best work is on the outside and not on the inside. So the question then becomes who gets slid to the inside, who becomes that guy, and I don't honestly have an answer. I think initially in camp it'll be Chris Boyd, just because he's been there for a year and they like to go with the experienced guys. I kind of hope it's not Chris Boyd by the end unless he shows us a lot in that time. But I have a feeling Gladney is going to be their extra cornerback, their nickel. Is that what? Yeah, whatever.
And it's a little surprising too because one thing that Zimmer seems to really go for with corners is length. He talks about that a lot. One of the biggest cons in reading Gladney's draft profiles is his length and size. But Hughes is also 5'10", just like Gladney is. Dantzler, I think, is like 6'2" and has good length. Holton Hill obviously has that length. And so I guess that's where the arguments are coming in for people.
I just want to point out, Gladney's short, but he's got really long arms, so he's disproportionate. But he's got long arms.
Yeah, so I also did this tiny bit of a study on Jeff Gladney. So he plays a lot bigger than what he is, and I think that might have been what attracted Zimmer, because if you look at his game tape against Colin Johnson from Texas, even though Colin Johnson isn't the best receiver, he's 6'6", and Gladney basically shut him down pretty well. And also, if you look at his tape against Denzel Mims, when that was a little bit more of a back and forth battle, I think Mims caught a touchdown on him and had like maybe a couple other catches, but Gladney also kind of held his own a little bit. It was, and you know, Mims is like what 6'2", 6'3", and has super long arms. Is actually pretty fast for his size. So Gladney does well physically against just about anybody, and I think that might have been what attracted Zim to him. Also, I think Gladney has the skill set to push down to nickel corner because he has like really dynamic hips. He's super fluid. He can run with just about anybody. My only thing with him is that I don't think his man technique is as good as it could be. And also at the top of the route, you can see he's not there just yet. You can. In the NFL, I can see him drawing a lot of penalties. I can see him maybe getting beat on people who are kind of savvy at the top of the route with their breaks. So that's an area he has to work on. But I like the Gladney pick. I think he has the versatility to go outside or inside. So, I mean, we'll see what the depth chart looks like. Mike Hughes, I actually think Mike Hughes does better in the nickel than he does outside. If we watch outside, he got bullied sometimes. Amari Cooper
Yeah.
destroyed him. Mike Williams was killing him until he got the pick. Travis Kelce bullied him outside. Keenan Allen bullied him outside. He doesn't use. He's not small. He's like 5'10", 5'11". He has decent sized arms. He just doesn't use it very well. And I think in the slot he was much better dealing with the smaller guys. So I wouldn't be surprised if day one we kind of had like a Gladney, Hill, Dantzler kind of lineup. Maybe Boyd with Hughes in the nickel.
I just want to. I think it'll be interesting to see how Mike Hughes does this year because he lost, most of last offseason due to the ACL injury.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting, especially with this year. He's going to essentially lose his whole offseason because of COVID. So, yeah.
I wonder if they'll start. I don't know. I mean, we talked about that before we came on air, but do you think maybe that means they might start working these rookies out like soon within the next couple weeks? Because I can't imagine. It just seems counterintuitive to get rid of the bye week and a lot of the team based stuff before. It seems like they're looking for more injuries and stuff. If these guys aren't completely in shape or they don't get time off, they're just kind of battering rams each week. And if the argument is, well, they can't practice together now because of COVID, and it'll be like a petri dish of guys coming together. Maybe that should be the same logic for postponing the season, which nobody wants, obviously. But if they were to institute some sort of testing process and put these guys up like they used to in Mankato and let them, all stay in dorms and make sure that, everyone's tested and everything, I could see them maybe starting rookie minicamp sooner than later because it seems like a bad idea to reduce the amount of preparation and time off, but keep the same amount of games and everything just because you want to fulfill a $10 billion TV contract.
So yeah, the state of Georgia actually I think is starting to lift its bans on like social distancing and stuff like that. So I guess it'll be up to the Falcons to kind of see what it is that they want to do as far as getting guys together. So I mean, you can so of course they're going to ban like groups of like 50. You're not going to be able to get 90 guys together all in one room. That's just I think it'll be a long time before we're able to do that. But I did see something on Bleacher Report saying that NBA wise they're getting guys together in states where things have started to be lifted. And if you know NBA, they only have 15-man rosters. So if you can maybe get like a QB room together outside and then maybe get a wide receiver room and maybe do each position group like at like on their own with their like respective coaches, that might be something that they can do. But
about the only thing they're going to be missing out on is the ability to scrimmage. Because as far as I know, a lot of mini camp and stuff is literally just running drills and working with positions, which makes sense.
right.
Yeah. That's actually be one of the harder for me. Oh, go for it, man.
Yeah, I think a lot of stuff you miss out on is like technique wise. All the like stuff that the coaches nitpick, and what you get to do you think of defensive linemen like hand usage, where to place your hands for offensive linemen, how to get your hands inside of someone's chest, and I think it's like the little things that you're really not going to be able to really nitpick is what people are going to fall behind on, and that for rookies that's what they really really need. But I think as far as like veteran guys, I don't really think they should miss a step. It got guys like Kirk Cousins, Adam Thielen, Danielle Hunter, Eric Kendricks, guys that have been through this multiple times. They know the workouts, they know the drills, they know the playbook. They shouldn't really miss a step because they can do all this stuff at home.
You just worry a little bit about like the new system with Kubiak and what he's going to do, and then obviously having new faces at the receiver position and working on timing and those little idiosyncrasies. Let's move on to the pick that I think you guys both agree was the best pick of this draft, which is the Ezra Cleveland pick. I know after the first night after Thursday, the live stream was, well, if they can, trade for Trent Williams, then maybe that'll make the Jefferson pick look better, so on and so forth. But you guys were both enamored by this pick, and I wanted to pick your brains about that. I also actually do really, really like this pick.
So yeah, I actually, like I said earlier in the show, I have my Ezra Cleveland film thread on my Twitter page up now, but I did his study today, and I think so. It's hard to judge him because in I think the division, I don't watch college football, but I think the division he played in was like Mountain West, I think it's called, and there weren't really any elite guys in that Mountain West, so you don't get to see him go up against the Chase Youngs and the Levon Chasons of the world. So you're judging him off the talent he's going against, and I think his PFF stats were, I want to say he had like 9 hurries, like 4 QB hits, and I think like 2 or 3 sacks given up. And on his film, his pass sets are pretty good. He did have a little bit of trouble with speed, a tiny bit. His anchor sometimes was given up, but it wasn't bad. But it's just hard to judge him against NFL-ready talent when he was playing these guys in the Mountain West, and he was dominating these guys, especially in run offense.
Yeah,
I think he's a much better run blocker than I initially gave him credit for.
I think that's it. I mean, my concern, I guess, with him, despite the fact that I like the pick, is I've just read things that say, his play strength is a major concern, I think was the quote from NFL.com. Actually, I know it is because I'm looking at it right now. That he gets walked back into the pocket by speed to power guys, and going off of what you said, also not going against elite talent and having some of those issues, I think can be corrected by working out with trainers in the NFL, getting older, building muscle, and so on and so forth. But I don't necessarily think he can do it week 1 of 2020.
But, I mean, you'd be surprised how fast these guys are able to come in and pick up 10, 15 pounds of muscle. And I think
O'Neal added like 25 pounds of muscle
first off season, which is crazy.
Yeah.
So
you're right.
As like a tackle, when you're scouting a tackle, what you want to see, if you're looking at a negative, the thing you want to see is, his play strength isn't where it needs to be, because some of these college programs don't necessarily have the coaches or the strength coaches or the nutritionists to really get these guys where they need to be. So if I can bring a guy in who's already there in his pass sets, already there in his concepts, where I think his concept of a zone blocking scheme is like elite already. So I think if you can bring a guy in and he already have that mental aspect and the technical aspect, and all you need to do is feed him and throw him in the weight room, I think you're happy.
Yeah. What did you think, Kirby?
I really, really like the Cleveland pick for a couple of reasons. First of all, fit. I think he's going to do well in the zone blocking scheme. Kind of like DeShawn said, I think he has the ability to be coached and trained up to the level of an NFL tackle. I have a very... I've kind of talked about this with you, Joe, and I think I posed the question through you to Tice when he was on Morning Joe's at one point. The idea of tackles, alignment in general in the NCAA, outside of very specific programs such as Wisconsin, I think they very rarely come in with the size or the ability to be like a force right away. And I think it's a failing of kind of what DeShawn said, that just teams in the NCAA don't coach that way. They also
a lot of spread offenses too.
A ton of spread offense.
Younger, faster guys.
Yeah, so I think I see essentially the same things that DeShawn sees, where his game is like, it's a shadow there. Like, you can see the outline of what he's trying to do, and that he has the ability there. Now he just needs the coaching to fill it in, and make it a whole picture, to use a crazy art metaphor. I guess I'm using my art minor finally.
Hooray!
But yeah, I really, really love the pick. again, for the flexibility it gives them. They now have the ability, they now have the leverage over Riley Reef because they didn't before. They were pretty much, Reef was able to say, well, I'm your starting left tackle. And not that this was necessarily happening. I'm speaking in a hypothetical. Reef would have had the ability to sit there and go, well, I'm your starting left tackle, and you've got nobody to replace me. So, sorry. But now they have the ability, if they want to try to slot Cleveland in there. I think it would be a weird move. I think it would be a very, very risky move. But taking this year
to move
out
him
of,
to guard.
well, just to do anything with like or to start Ezra Cleveland day one at left tackle would be extremely risky. But they now have the leverage over Riley Reef if they want to use that. I think looking past this year, which is, I know, a hard thing to do for us, looking past this year, this was an amazing, amazing pick because I think Cleveland is going to be able to get coached up to the point where, and Joe, you kind of alluded to this, he should be able to anchor that left side for the next 10 years or more, assuming his health holds out and he's as good as the tape kind of shows, and he can put on the pounds and get to an NFL size.
Let's go through the fourth round really quickly. I know, DeShawn, you covered two of the three in DJ Wonnum, the defensive end from South Carolina, and also James Lynch, the tackle from Baylor. I will say that the list I'm seeing on CBSSports.com give both of those picks a C-. So, and then the third pick is the linebacker from Oregon, Troy Dye, who got an A pick, surprisingly, since I guess that's kind of backwards from what we were thinking in that regard. I don't necessarily think linebacker was a huge position of need comparatively. But what did you think of Lynch? Starting with DeShawn, since you did do those deep dive.
So Lynch, I actually like Lynch a lot. I don't like that he played. I think he was at Baylor, right? I think maybe.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
I don't like that he played outside at Baylor, but I don't blame him because he was good at it in college. He brings some solid technique. He's not. I don't think he's athletic enough to survive on the edge in the NFL, because you see him, he has like this wide base, and he ran like a 5.02 40 or something like that. So he's definitely going to have to make the move inside, to which is our most crowded room, unfortunately. So I think some guys like Jalen Holmes will probably be cut. Jaleel Johnson might not make it through camp. But he was good. I mean, there's a reason why he had 70 pressures and 13 and a half sacks or something crazy. He has a really wide range of like repertoire of pass rushing moves. That's not something you really see coming out of college. Usually you just see guys like Chase Young win with physical abilities. But Lynch he's strong, but he doesn't have that quickness to really beat you around the edge, so he relied on technique, and he was really good at it. So I actually really like that pick for James Lynch, because he comes in, you know what you're getting, so now you just have to coach him up to play the three tech. He actually reminds me of a Viking that played a few years ago, Tom Johnson, who was kind of like he reminds me a lot of Tom Johnson a little bit. And then you have DJ Wonnum. So I watched this tape. He doesn't really pop off the page as much as the other prospects do. They let him play a lot of stand up. There's a lot of times where I think he played South Carolina where they let him come off the line and kind of just float into space, which I think was kind of weird. But he does have that Danielle Hunter mold. He ran, I want to say, a 4.73, which is only a little bit slower than Danielle Hunter. He has these long arms, but he's not as strong. He doesn't have the strength that Danielle Hunter has. And his tape really isn't super impressive. I don't think his pass rush moves are really there. So that's going to be like a really project there, as Danielle Hunter was, because Danielle Hunter, if you remember, Danielle Hunter coming out of college I don't think he was a big production guy at all, and he was just this physical freak. So I think is the same to where this is going to be Patterson's project, to where he tries to get him to a good spot 3 years down the line, because I think Hunter didn't start until his was it his third year? Was it his second year? He didn't start until then.
He didn't start until
Yeah,
his
it was a
third
while
year
because
because
Brian
of
Robeson was like,
Right.
and he was kind of a ceremonial guy starter at the end of it, wasn't he? Like he would technically be the starter, but Hunter
But
was the actual
but I
bulk
mean,
yeah.
of the
it worked out
snaps
for him
guy.
because I think Hunter had 6.5 sacks his first year, like 10 or 12 the year after that. So it worked out for him. So I see DJ Wonnum taking a similar route? As of right now, I don't. But then again, if there's one coach on the team that I do not doubt, it's Andre Patterson because he's proved to be
Sure.
to bring these guys in and just form them so well. To have Everson Griffin and to just have this track record. So I'll never doubt Andre Patterson. So James Lynch, I think he'll be successful with. DJ Wonnum might take a little bit more time, but I really like the picks. I didn't do a dive into Troy Dye, but I did read about him. I think he converts to safety because if I had to
Oh,
describe him, he reminds me of J-Ron Curse. Like I want to say they're the same height, just about the same weight. I want to say Troy Dye ran a 4.48 and is a tad bit stronger, but they play like the exact same. So I wouldn't be surprised if and he also has really good coverage skills. So the big nickel is back into play. So I think whatever J. Ron Kurtz was doing, Troy Dye can probably do all of it plus more. So I think that's why they gave that pick at A. And plus he was a lot higher on the board. I want to say in some boards they had him like top 120, 115, something like that. So I like that pick. I think he comes in and you immediately replace your do it all guy.
yeah, I think that's a huge loss, losing Curse. That raises a question though. Let's say that he becomes, a safety. That would make 3 safeties in this draft. And I know we're going to talk about rounds 5 through 7 and undrafted free agent guys on the next show. But did you guys get the sense that that was in some way telling in regards to the Anthony Harris unsigned franchise tender situation? Maybe they might end up trading him, so on and so forth. It just seemed like, if they're maybe they don't feel like they can keep him after this year. I mean, as far as I know, he still hasn't signed the franchise tag, so maybe that was, at least to me, a sign that maybe there's more going on there than we think.
So I don't. Oh yeah, Kirby, go ahead. My bad.
I was just gonna say that I don't know that it is indicative, but we kind of see this every year. I feel like I was just thinking about this as I was looking at this list. We kind of see this every year where in the last couple rounds they draft one particular position, like multiple guys, and it feels like it's in preparation to try to find like that gem. um and last year it was kind of, we went wide receiver back to back in the 7th. I think we've gone linebacker back to back before in the 5th or 6th. So it just feels like this year it was safety. And I hadn't thought about it in the way that like Anthony Harris, whatever, because I thought about it just as depth. Because I don't think about Anthony Harris as a guy who's going to be gone. But it's an interesting question. I think what it does do for you is it gives you flexibility to possibly say that to Harris, where, hey, either you sign a long-term deal or we don't really need you.
Yeah.
But I don't know that it's that, and it's more just a matter of they're trying to hit on their next safety, especially with, I think we've seen in the last couple of years, I hate to say it, Harrison Smith seems to be slowing down and not quite playing. I'm gonna get railed for this, but not quite playing his level, because for a few years there he was very obviously dominant. I think he's still a very good contributing player, don't get me wrong, especially at the line of scrimmage, but he doesn't seem to have the range that he once did in the defensive backfield. It seems like he's lost maybe half a step, and that makes a huge difference when you're trying to cover 25, 30, 40 yards in a couple of seconds.
So I hope they don't let go of Harris because I think Harris kind of lets Harrison Smith do whatever it is that Harrison Smith does, which is kind of a little bit of everything. So, I mean, we did lose two safeties. Um, so we did have to replace those two guys because we actually actively used all of our safeties, and I don't think there was anybody really depth wise behind Harrison Smith. Well, I don't think, but I think a lot of the guys like Fields, Maters. I don't think those guys really make the team because Nate Maters last year in the preseason was awful, god awful. But we could see Harrison Hand. They might convert to safety. Safety. I heard something about that because it was kind of like a redundant corner pick. You already had three in a roster, and you draft three more. He could convert over to safety. Um, they have the cap to keep Harris, so I would kind of hope that they wouldn't not sign him to a long-term deal because if they're not considering making a move for a guard, they don't really have a reason to let Harris go unless because once you cut Reef, which whether it happens this year or next year, which is you would think it would happen sometime between this year and next year, you just open up like 13 million cap space going down the line, and you have that room to sign Harris to a long-term deal. And so I hope they don't let him go. I hope that the depth that they drafted was just depth. And maybe I know Harrison Smith is getting up there, so maybe they do try to draft someone to be the next Harrison Smith, and which is kind of weird because they didn't extend him. Harrison Smith has a very extendable contract to where if you extend him the next 2 or 3 years, you save like 6 million against the cap, and they haven't done that yet. So they are looking to move on from Harrison once this contract expires, but I mean we'll have to wait and see what happens there.
Yeah, I think Harris is I see people arguing that you don't want to give like the 10 mil season that he's asking for to his to him or to his safety in general. He Simmer's defense has never been predicated on turnovers, really. It's been more about, discipline and doing your thing and creating third and longs and so having a guy that's a ball hawk like that, I think is extremely important because it almost seems like a bonus. Since again we weren't really accustomed to Zimmer's defenses having all these turnovers, but especially back when it was during the peak of what Zimmer's defense could have been. And then again, then it also opens another position of need in the defensive backfield. We just don't need that. I think the bleeding has to stop at some point. Even though you're looking to rebuild, he's still young. He could still be a mainstay of the defense for the foreseeable future. And so, yeah, I mean, overall, the draft was, again, I think people kind of we're starved for news, especially in the Vikings media, and we're almost like what was the analogy I used in my article, like a bunch of kittens that have been locked in a trunk for a week, and then somebody lowers 15 shiny tinsel balls in there, and then people get so enamored by the amount of tinsel balls that they don't really say okay, because all the arguments against what I'm saying are not really about the text or the content of it, but more so the approach, right?
Right.
Philosophically, like, oh, that's hindsight. You can't look at players you didn't draft. They're not actually addressing the crux of what I've been saying, which is, I'm not a negative person just for the sake of being negative. I think I'm realistic, and if you're realistic when you cover this team, you end up being negative because bad things happen. And B, just there was a tremendous opportunity here and it didn't need to be in the first or second round even. That's not even what I'm arguing. Even though I didn't like the Justin Jefferson pick for reasons we've discussed, to really shore up the interior of this offensive line for the foreseeable future. And so hopefully they bring Josh Klein back. I think that's incredibly important. I am not a fan of moving Reef. I'm hearing some people say, if it comes down to it and Cleveland starts week 1, and this will be the final question for you guys, and then we'll hop off. How would you feel about flipping O'Neal in Cleveland and putting O'Neal at left tackle and Cleveland at right, even though that seems relatively disastrous since that'd be a big flip for both, especially a rookie?
No. I'm just gonna come out and say no.
No. Yeah, I
Um,
agree. I agree with you.
Cleveland played a ton of snaps at left tackle in college. O'Neal, we have no idea if he's going to be able to make the transition. We talked about this a bit on the live stream. Some guys they can just flip and it's nothing. Other guys it's like learning to write with your other hand after writing with your trying to write lefty after writing righty for 20 years. Like if I tried to sign my name right now, it would look just terrible. I mean, it looks terrible either way, but yeah, it's just we don't know. You add a variable that it just becomes we don't know. And granted, we don't know that Ezra Cleveland's going to be a great left tackle in the NFL, but it's much safer and better to let him try to learn how to be a left tackle than to take the guy who's been playing right tackle for the last few years and you worked so hard to get him to be a right tackle, to take him and say, okay, well, you're going to play the other side now. And I think that's a part of it that like we don't talk about a lot, but Brian O'Neill was a tight end for his whole college career pretty much.
Yeah.
And then he just became a tackle and he's been way better than he was supposed to be. And don't get me wrong, I'm extremely glad for that, but we then are going to ask him to this stuff that he's learned for a couple of years, say, okay, now take that and flip it all around and do it all over here. Oh yeah, also you're now the most important person on the line. Oh, and you've got to face some of the best pass rushers. And I know we talked about that, like pass rushers flip anyways, but still it's just a whole different ball game that he might be able to do well. I would much rather you keep him at the position that he's going to do well and let Cleveland, who has played left tackle for the last few years, learn that position in the NFL.
And the reason I bring this up is really for effect. I just want to reinforce that these are the things that people are saying to me as to why my analysis is wrong, and I just don't see winning franchises having to do these things. Constantly reshuffle and put people at positions they haven't played before. That's not a winning strategy. That implies a lack of investment. And again, that's what's frustrating about it. I don't want to be too repetitive, but I think if we're looking at the approach of an argument, like I said about people saying hindsight and whatnot, the idea of yet again having to look at reshuffling guys into positions they haven't played before or otherwise would not play. What happened with Remmers when he moved from being a guy who was solid at right tackle to being arguably the worst right guard this team has had this millennium. Because he never played the position before. Tom Compton also was awful. And then doing the same thing with Riley Reef and expecting different results. He's 30. He's going to be 32 when all the season starts. And that's half his lifetime ago almost that he played that position. Sure, it could work out. It does work out sometimes. He's, a bigger guy that might help. But I also don't think this offensive line is predicated on big guys. On the offensive line, it's more, the size helps, but athletic guys who can get to the second level and open things up that way. And so again, that's sort of my frustration. Do you have any final thoughts on that, Mr. Vaughn?
Yeah, like you said, you want to leave them at the position that they can play. And as far as edge rushers go, they do flip sides to get the better matchup, especially in our division, as you see Zadarius Smith, Preston Smith flip sides all the time. Khalil Mack rushes from wherever he wants to. And so flipping sides won't really make that big of a difference. It's more about filling the holes that you have. And somebody went out, I can't remember who it was, but I saw an article saying that someone said that Riley Reef might be better inside. So one of his old coaches or something like that said that he might be better anywhere that's not left tackle. So while that could be true, we'll see what happens. But honestly, I don't think was it Tice?
Tice said he's more of a right side guy than a left side guy, pretty adamantly. And I've looked at his career, and I couldn't see him really ever playing on the right side. So I don't know if that's just an assessment based on him having obviously this view of the offensive line that is godlike, that being Mike Tyson. But yeah, I had never seen that before, so that's an interesting take. I'm gonna follow up with him on that and have a quote, probably in the article about this show, or an article about that in the line specifically.
So when it comes to left and right guys, you usually want your left guys to be a little bit better pass pros, and you want your right guy. Your right guys are usually like the big guys, the maulers who you can run behind, and that's usually how people kind of
Bill
set up.
Mold.
That's how people set up their offensive line. So that's why when you're like doing draft stuff and you hear guys say, "Oh, he's more of a right tackle than he is a left tackle," it's because they think that he can be this run blocker, but he's not exactly there yet when it comes to pass protection. So and also, you know how whenever you bring in an extra tight end, they usually most of the time, sometimes you'll see them line up left, but most of the time your extra tight end lines up on the right side of the line, so where you can get some extra help on your right tackle. So while he might be correct that Reef is a better right-sided guy than he is a left-sided guy, we have Brian O'Neill there, who's already kind of he's great in pass protection. He's solid, not fantastic in run blocking, but he gets by. So it kind of just leaves Reef on this island to where we try to kick him inside and we pay him at that current price, because I don't think Reef has a reason to really restructure his contract. Because if we cut him now, we owe him 2.2 mil. And then I think he goes out and he has an immediate market at left tackle. Because, I mean, while he wasn't great, he was better than a lot of guys. So
Yeah.
you go into camp, if we ever get to camp, if you go into camp, someone gets injured and you need a tackle, Reef is out there. You automatically get a top 16, 17 tackle. So, I mean...
And to be fair, before he came here, he was relatively even sought after higher than that. I think, not to, this is an oversimplification too, but I mean, he's played next to hot garbage a lot here, right? Tom Compton, Pat Elflein. And so, I mean, if he had someone, let's say he had Steve Hutchinson next to him, I think things would look a lot better on the left side of the line that way. Who knows?
I think anybody would look a lot better with
Hindsight.
Steve Hutchinson next to him.
Not me.
You don't think that
What paladin?
Hutch's manliness would just raise you up to another level?
All of a sudden, I have a full bushy beard. Just my voice drops 3 octaves. Let's find out. I'm gonna invite him on the show. Yeah, this has been the comeback episode of About the Labor. We are very excited to bring this to you guys. I do want to highlight the launch of our Minnesota sports podcast only website, purpleterritoryradio.com. Some of you might be familiar with that. We ran some beta testing about a year ago. We have over 20 Minnesota-based sports podcasts on that, including Gleaming the Geek, Locked On Vikings, all of the Climbing the Pocket stuff, Realistic Randy, the aforementioned Mike Tice and his show, Odds and Ends with Mike Tice, Morning Joe's, Load the Box, all the stuff that we do. So go to that site. Every day you'll see, One Bar in Lupagus, Grapes in Gorak, just an amazing array of Minnesota sports podcasts, and you'll be able to subscribe to them, so on and so forth. So we're very excited to have that as the aspect, or a new aspect of our network. But we will be back. I promise the listeners out there that have hung in there with us with each version of this show, will be, coming at you each week, and we obviously appreciate everyone's patience. We'll get a lot of really cool and exciting guests. I'll try to get Chad Greenway to come on next week to get his take on things. Mike Tice, Nick Swartz, and I had to name drop those people just for Kirby's sake. But
you just can't help it.
I can't. It's 95% of my personality. Let's let everybody know where to follow us on Vikings Twitter so they can tell us how stupid we are. My handle is at VTPTSD. So VT as in Vikings territory, PTSD as in post-traumatic stress disorder. Where can they find you, Kirby?
At KJOCON14. Yeah, I don't have a fun way to spell it. But if you follow me, sometimes you'll get random tweets in the middle of the night about things that I've been either drunkenly or half sleep deprived from taking care of my child think about. So got that
That's
going for
the
me.
best kind of content as far as I'm I'm concerned. And people can find these on the article that posts this episode as well. And then DeShawn, you mentioned yours earlier, but if you want to remind the folks.
So I
Oh no.
16. Being my typos.
Try it again.
I
Try it again. You were cut out.
Oh, cut out. Oh, okay,
Yeah.
okay, I got you. So I'm at Vikings with an S and fans with another S, 16 on Twitter, and like I said earlier, I have my DJ Wonnum, my James Lynch, and my Troy Dye, no, not Troy Dye, Ezra Cleveland film threads out now. Tomorrow I'm gonna try to hit Kenny Willikes and Troy Dye also. So if you guys want to follow
Awesome.
me and check those out, that'd be awesome.
Speaking of
Yeah,
Twitter,
and,
hey Joe, did you ever count the views from that 1 week?
between you and I,
Yeah,
I'm 99% sure you beat me.
unless you count that one OBJ article.
Yeah, that was just hot garbage. I can't. I mean, I don't sleep at night anyway, clearly, but I can't take credit for that one. That was not
I'll
proud.
text you.
Not
I'll
proud
text
of
you the picture I want you to use as your avatar.
it. All right. Yeah, we had a bet. Whoever had the most clicks in 1 week, and Kirby spent all his time on these really thoughtful and deep, analytical and analysis articles about draft profiles, and I essentially posted a YouTube video of someone playing Madden with Odell Beckham Jr. on the roster, and got like 20,000 clicks out of it. I'm like the Jay Leno of Vikings content creation. But yeah, this has been About the Labor. I hope people enjoyed this episode. We'll be back each Monday to put some new flavor in your ear. See you guys next week. Skol.
New flavor.
Cool.
You might want to keep that one.
There we go.